is actually part of the baseball scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it, maybe you got some academic scholarship stuff, and then maybe you got the life scholarship from the state of South Carolina.
Grants and all that.
Which is based off the education lottery.
Right.
Or at least it was when I was in school. So I think this is still much needed. And, I go back to football, though. Like, why do they need 105 scholarships for football?
I think it may just be that all the other sports were changing, and you just kind of do them all, I guess. That's
a terrible reason to change anything.
I'm not saying that's a good reason. That's the only thing that I can
change
think
for
of.
Change sake.
But in this, the way this is structured, they did not eliminate walk-ons, right? Like, you can still have
to
walk-ons.
my knowledge, you can still have them. I mean, this is certainly going to diminish the ones that you have, but they're not gone completely the way I understand it.
Yeah, your roster limit's now 105 as opposed to what it was before. And then if you want to try to field a college football team and say, we're going to give out 25 scholarships and that's it, you're welcome to do that.
So is your roster limit 105?
Mm-hmm.
So you
I think the roster limit, yes, so football has a roster limit of 105
so
players.
you can't go to 117, 115, even with walk-ons.
And Ross Dellinger's piece says the roster limit is 105. The 105 may not be a requirement until the start of the competitive season, which gives coaches flexibility to go beyond that figure during preseason camp. So basically, you will have guys cut in essence, is what it looks like.
And this would go into effect as early as the 2025-2026 season, so right at a calendar year from now. We'll talk with our guy, Jack Veltri, get his thoughts on how this relates to baseball, also get his strategy for playing birdies with Beamer in the wet today, because they are still a go out there at the golf course. We're broadcasting live, Firehouse Subs 2805B, Sunset Boulevard here in West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Store opens up in 30 minutes. Come by and see us. Going to have some tickets to give away, T-shirts, koozies, some tickets as well. I already said that, but reiterating once again, Tyler, West, and Chris going until noon here on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point and Gamecock Central takeover. We are out at Firehouse Subs 2805B Sunset Boulevard in West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Tyler, Wes, and Chris can be going out here until noon. Store opens up at 10 o'clock. Come by and see us. Got t-shirts, koozies, going to have some tickets to give away, and of course, delicious Firehouse Subs as well. We head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines, welcoming our guy, Jack Veltri, who's getting set to take part in Birdies with Beamer. And sounds like things are a full go. Do you have a strategy for playing in the wet today, Jack?
Honestly, thanks for having me on, guys. Really appreciate it, first off. For today, honestly, look, I'm not really that great of a golfer at all by any stretch. Not like any of these guys I'm sure playing today. But my goal, honestly, just hit the ball. I'll deal with the elements however they come. As long as the ball is in the air and I'm not hitting the dirt every single time, I think that's a win in my book.
Well, sometimes rain can be the great equalizer. Maybe that'll help you out today.
Yeah, hopefully that's the case. But I'm a little surprised. I guess the course is in good enough condition to play today. But we'll see what happens. It should be a fun day.
Hey, more power to y'all out there. We were just talking in the last segment there about the new ruling from the NCAA in reference to scholarships. And we talked about it a lot from the football standpoint. But I can't think of a sport that's going to benefit from this any greater than baseball, who's forever been plagued with the 11.7 scholarships, now being able to have a full allotment of 34 to fill out the roster. I mean, I imagine there's some guys on the team today, most everybody on the team probably, that is thrilled that this is going to be coming to fruition here in a year or so.
Yeah, this is going to be massive for baseball. When I saw I think on Twitter yesterday, the scholarship updates for all the sports, I think baseball was probably the one that stood out most, just because 11.7 scholarships really isn't that much in the whole grand scheme of things when you look at the whole entire roster. But now with the ability to give up 34 scholarships, it's really going to help out South Carolina with, filling up the roster a little more and, giving the players, I think, what they all deserve. And it also helps out, mid-major schools too, because, they can also have the ability to give up, more scholarships and stuff when it would have been tough otherwise. So I think this is a big win all around for college baseball.
Hey, Jack, Chris here. That's a great point about the mid-majors that I was actually going to bring up and ask you about. Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball had a piece on this, and, Eric Bakich weighed in from his end, high-level baseball. Eric Bakich from Clemson of, hey, this is going to help a lot of guys. College baseball is often tied to significant student loan debt, so it'll help at the ACC, SEC, big-time college baseball level, but also mid-majors. One of the mid-major coaches that he spoke to said this will actually help us because there is now not only the increasing scholarships, but the roster limit has been lowered, right? Now you have, 6 less guys that you can carry on your roster. So for a guy that wants to go play college baseball, maybe they can't get up to that certain level. Maybe they step back a level. I thought that was kind of an interesting point that coach made.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Chris. And like I said before, this really does help out everyone involved. I mean, especially the mid-majors where, if you're a kid that's, maybe a good player, but he's not getting the types of offers he's wanting from big-time schools. Now I think a mid-major school can definitely swoop in and, garner his services with, the idea of a scholarship. And I feel like that is something that's a lot easier to not turn down compared to, hey, we're a mid-major school, we'll give you a walk-on spot because we don't have any scholarships available. I think that's really going to help. And, I mean, long-term, I don't know what the future will hold with this. But considering that some of these mid-major, coaches and schools are on board with this and it helps them and they realize that, I think this can definitely be, a good, good thing for all parties involved.
Jack, on the other side of it, though, if you're South Carolina and you're now obviously a full scholarship sport in baseball, you're a program that traditionally has been really, really good, obviously. And kids, let's just say, start with your state. Like, there's a lot of good baseball in this state. You now have the opportunity to potentially stockpile talent like you never have before. And, I think even you talk about guys kind of making that decision. Am I going to go to the draft? Am I going to try to go pro first, or am I going to go play at the college level? I got to imagine the ability to have your school completely paid for without dipping into your NIL money. Now to tack your NIL money on top of that, You know, I could see this thing going both ways, honestly. Like, I could see the mid majors sort of, maybe there's a guy in the past that they could give a little more money to, but now they're getting a full ride from South Carolina. And so I think you could see the SECs and the richer schools maybe stockpile a little bit more talent overall and have a little bit more depth overall. And also, I just wonder the effect this might have, Jack, on guys making that decision about, do I want to go ride a bus and play in the minor leagues for a few years, or do I want to go enjoy the college experience?
Yeah, look, Wes, I think that's a great point you bring up because, this is something that I think gets talked about every year. And this year was definitely no exception when it comes to, some of the guys that were drafted for South Carolina. It's like, the later into the draft you get and they get picked, it's like, okay, well, I think the decision's pretty easy. I think they should come back to school because, now with NIL and stuff, they have the ability to make more money and stuff. But that's not always the case. It's, NIL is a great thing for college, athletes and stuff. But at the same time, the money at, the ML or the pro level might be better. And it's also like some of these kids definitely, let's be real, they probably don't want to, go to school and stuff. And so I think that plays a big role in it. But now with the ability to have scholarships for, 34 guys on the roster, I mean, that makes things a lot easier because like you said, it doesn't come out of their IL paychecks anymore. It will, their school will be paid for. And so I think it's going to make a big difference. Now, whether guys want to come or not, with weighing out the pro and college levels, I'm not sure how much that will change. I still think some guys feel like, okay, if my talent's good enough, I'm just going to go to the pros. But again, it does make the decision a little easier now to where, like, if you're kind of teetering between both sides of it, now you have the the option of, hey, if I go to college, I'm going to have a scholarship plus NIL, so I can get my education for free for 4 years. So why not? So I think the decision does become a little easier, but then again, every player is different.
Again, last one for you here. Got about a minute, Jack. I don't know when the next chance you're going to get to talk to Coach Maneri. And again, this won't go into effect until at earliest the 2026 baseball season. But I'd be interested to know how his recruiting strategy is going to change now that he does have the ability to fill an entire roster with scholarship guys.
Yeah, I definitely think, this year has been a little different just because, he's coming into a whole new situation with a lot of guys that weren't his own. I mean, a lot of these guys that are going to end up sticking around are Mark Kingston players. So I think once you get to 2026 and a lot of these Kingston guys are gone or whatever and such, he'll really have the ability to just go with his own roster and stuff and kind of pick out who he wants. Because again, the thing with this year is, and it's going to be something to keep an eye on come fall practice, is that there are a lot of guys on the roster fighting for spots on the roster right now, and eventually it's going to have to be cut down to whatever the roster limit is. So I think moving forward, especially with these scholarships, Maneri's really going to be able to just pick and choose kind of who he thinks is going to be best for his roster. And again, it's a win-win for all sides involved, and I think this is a really good move for college baseball.
Absolutely. Going to be huge for the sport and interested to see how it affects it in the years to come. Appreciate your time, Jack. Have fun out on the links, and remember, you can't shoot worse than par today.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
All right, absolutely. Jack Veltri of Gamecock Central getting set to head out there with Birdies and Beamer. Wet day, but they're still going to play the course regardless. And we are broadcasting live out at Firehouse Subs 2805B Sunset Boulevard here in West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Store opens up right in about 15 minutes. Come by and see us. Get a delicious Firehouse Subs, get a t-shirt, get a koozie, have some tickets to give away a little bit later on as well. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Lincoln Riley saying some controversial things at Big Ten Media Days involving smoking meats. We'll get into that coming up next here on The Game. Cut number 2, Dave. Welcome back in. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. We are out at Firehouse Subs, 2805B Sunset Boulevard here in West Columbia. Going up until noon. Store opens up in just a couple minutes. Come by and see us. And, you know, one thing I think we all love about Firehouse Subs, of course, is the Smokehouse beef and cheddar brisket sandwich. Wes obviously likes to add bacon to that. They know how to do brisket right here at Firehouse.
A few years ago, you sent out a tweet that went viral. Fair or unfair about your smoked Easter brisket? Just curious if you're still working on your barbecue skills out in LA.
I need to improve my photography skills, not my barbecuing skills. So absolutely, I got to work on it a little bit this summer.
something.
Yeah, we're thinking of
All right.
something.
Got a few minutes. We will come up with an idea of
But
what you have
just
to do
show
to
up
get
at
tickets.
this point.
Show
If
up.
you're wanting them, we're not going to give them to you.
We're not going to give them to you. You have to do something, but we'll come up
figure
with
out
that
what it is
something.
when you get
Again,
here.
we're 2805 Sunset Boulevard, West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Come by and see us. Get your list of Firehouse subs. Get your chance to win some tickets to go see the home opener versus Old Dominion on August the 31st as well. I want to dive into this. Bet Online released their list yesterday of first head coach to be fired in college football. No surprise. You have names like Billy Napier and Sam Pittman at the top of the list. Napier with 4-1 odds, Sam Pittman at 5-1 odds. But some of the names on this list actually pretty interesting in terms of ability to possibly be fired this season. Shane Beamer is actually on this list, a little bit more of a long shot at 16-1. This kind of goes back to something we talked about last week, where there are a lot of people at media days, and Terry was talking about this yesterday. Kind of the national perception is, oh, Beamer's on the hot seat. Beamer's on the hot seat. If they have a bad season this year, then he's gone. We certainly don't believe that here locally, knowing what we know about this program. Ray Tanner's the AD and all that kind of stuff. But outside of this bubble, a lot of people look at this as a make or break year for Shane Beamer.
Think about what the conversation was nationally exactly 12 months ago.
I know.
After obviously beating Tennessee, beating Clemson, getting in an absolute battle with Notre Dame and losing a close game, it was, can Beamer and the Gamecocks take the next step?
Right.
They've overachieved compared to what people expect going into both of their seasons so far. Then you have, and don't get me wrong, I know it was a disappointing season for South Carolina, but it wasn't even a season where you just kind of ran the train off the tracks, right? Like
sure.
it was 5-7. You were one win away. And again, not saying, there's levels to everything, not saying that you should be happy with it or accept it or any of those things. But this was not a 2-10 season, for example.
Right.
This was a down year that some things went against you. And it is what it is. It happened. But I think it is fascinating how many people blindly outside of a program, like last year, they blindly, without looking at everything South Carolina had to replace, without sort of getting into the number of freshmen that we're going to have to play, said, they're going to they could take another step. This year, you see the exact opposite of that. People blindly saying, well, it's Beamer on the hot seat because he won 5 games last year. And so the perception is just, I think, wrong.
Sure.
Honestly, unless you're winning championships, every coach in today's era is one false step away from being on the quote unquote at least warm seat.
Sure.
I think that's how quick it changes. Like Beamer would have been, if you had like a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the absolute hottest, Beamer would have been a 1 going into last season.
Right.
And now a couple of swing games you don't win last year, and people are, he's a long shot on this list. So there's how many coaches ahead of him? Just
there's
as a guess, not exactly.
1, 2, 3. There are about 10 or so coaches ahead of him. So he's not exactly high on the list, but just the fact that he's even on this list of shorter odds to be one of the first coaches fired is surprising. Now, yes, if Carolina goes out there and they lose every single game and they're 0-12, we can have a conversation that might push that forward a little bit. But I think we all believe that even if it is a bad season, a 4-8 or a 5-7, again, you miss a bowl game, I still think pretty confidently Shane Beamer is still your coach in 2025.
Well, and I think there's not a hard and fast number to any of these situations. Like if any coach goes 0-12,
sure,
they're going to possibly be fired.
Sure.
Like if you go 0-12, like that's program altering, and
right.
The level of belief in you as a coach just completely dissipates, right? So I think if you're South Carolina, if you're anybody and you go 0-12, you're going to have issues. I think it's actually somewhat interesting that Napier is ahead of Pittman.
Yes.
In terms of most likely to be fired.
Right.
Now, obviously they're fairly close. They're back to back there, but I probably would have said Pittman is in the biggest danger, the most danger, but I guess you have to look at the context.
Yeah.
Florida fans have higher expectations because of what they've done with Arkansas and a more difficult schedule. And you're talking about who's fired first.
Sure.
So not just are they fired this season, who's fired first? Florida, as we talked about with Nick De La Torre, I mean, they opened the season with Miami.
Right. They might lose the state championship all the way around. Miami, UCF, Florida State, obviously at the end of the year. So yeah, their schedule's a bear, obviously. And I think from the Arkansas standpoint, again, we were all surprised that Sam Pittman got another year, but they gave him the vote of confidence at the end of last year, said he was coming back. And I feel like if you do that, you have to at least give him most of the season. Now, yes, Arkansas season could go very, very poorly, but it might be one of those situations they at least let him ride it out to the end of the year, as opposed to maybe handing over the reins to Bobby Petrino as the interim head coach or something like that, and then maybe fire him at the end of the year if the record's not any better, as opposed to Billy Napier, who we've talked about that bear of a schedule in November. He might not make it that far as Florida's head coach. So I don't think it's crazy to think that he could be the first one off the board if things go sideways for the Gators this year.
Who's next on there, Tyler?
So after Napier and Pittman, you have Mario Cristobal down at Miami, actually. And, well, here's the interesting thing. Has the run at Miami been a little underwhelming to this point? It has. Year number 3 was a big step forward for him at Oregon before. He obviously gets Cam Ward in, a lot of good transfers from the transfer portal. So I think what the expectations of this team are, a lot of people are picking them to be in the ACC championship game against Florida State this year. Like, the bar is pretty high in year number 3 for Mario Cristobal. I personally don't think he's on the hot seat necessarily, but again, if they go out there with the collection of talent that they have and what this team is supposed to be and put in a 4-8 or a 5-7, then I'm not saying it's crazy that he could be fired. I just don't think he's going to be one of the first ones to be fired.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like his seat is particularly hot to me outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I mean, you look at him, I think this is your classic, very strong recruiter. There are still heavy questions about his game day coaching ability. And
put that on full display against Tech last year.
Well, when you have such a sort of national level miscue like that, if we don't watch Miami every week, which most of us don't, if you're sitting here listening to this show, you're not watching Miami every week. What do you think of when you think of Miami's season last year? I think of that blunder.
Into mind. Yep.
So now obviously for your casual fans of Miami, maybe that's something that stands out quite a bit to them as well. So I don't think he's particularly on the hot seat, but is there a sense of kind of an issue there where you can have a miscue that is so high profile, so just blatantly bad that it can stick with people, right? Even if we know coaches make bad decisions and good, like you're making 1,000 decisions a game. Some are going to be bad, some are going to be good. But when it's that bad and that high profile,
and when it's one that was easy, right? Take a knee, run the clock out, you win the game. Like that. That is one of those ones that for all of us playing EA College Football 25, we know the situation and we know exactly what we have to do in that moment. And a coach getting paid millions of dollars to actually coach a program didn't make the right decision there.
And it wasn't even one of those things where it's like they didn't need another first down to run out the clock. You know, like
right. They had the game sealed.
It's literally a knee.
Right.
And I mean, I've been following college football. I don't know when I can first remember, since I was like 8, I guess. And it's probably one of the worst in-game decisions and outcomes I've ever seen.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So he's third on the list. You got Dave Aranda at Baylor, who, is only a few years removed from, winning the conference championship, but things have kind of been on a downslide since then. A lot of pressure for him. Clark Lee, Vanderbilt, which I don't think they're going to cut bait with him this quickly. Everybody there understands how tough a job that is. And, 2 seasons ago, they did actually have a pretty decent year. Kalani Satake at BYU, they've kind of trended downward these past couple of years. They're obviously in the Big 12 now, which makes it even tougher. And then Ryan Day at Ohio State is the next one on that list, and which is insane out of context when you look at somebody that's 56-8 overall, has played for a national championship, has won the Big 10, but there is that element of not being able to beat Michigan these past couple of years, and they have probably the most talented roster in all of college football, maybe 1A and 1B with a team like Georgia. They are expected to be in the national championship this year, and if they fall short of that, and if they lose to Michigan again, I would not be shocked if Ryan Day was looking for a new job. I know it's crazy, but it could happen.
Well, he also has the pressure of you did build this great roster.
Right.
And with that comes quite a bit of responsibility to then live up to what the expectation is on paper for that roster.
Mhm.
And what do we know about today's college football world is if you're building a roster like that, which you even went heavy on the transfer portal as an established program. This was not a rebuild. This was not, oh, we have to bring in transfers in order to compete.
Mhm.
You're bringing in transfers to be the final pieces of the puzzle, to put you over the top. You know, you're going out and getting Quinshon Judkins to add to a running back room that already had a superstar. You're going out and getting arguably, you know, one of the best, if not the best, safety in the country. So I think for them, what comes along with that, an NIL support from your fan base. You're not having success in transfer portal without NIL structure, NIL resources. But what comes along with that, higher expectations, because fans are going to say, look, we helped you go get, directly helped you go get one of the best teams, if not the best roster in the country. Now it's up to you to go do something with it. Now, I do tend to think, Tyler, this is probably a college football playoff team.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we just talked about the Big Ten, dude.
Yeah.
Oregon is not coming into the conference to lay down.
Right.
That's a loaded Oregon team as well. And guess what? They have a high-profile quarterback transfer as well who could take them to another level. So I'm not convinced. Like, if you told me Ohio State, using your crystal ball, wins the national title, would not be shocked at all.
No, not at all.
But if you told me they didn't even win the Big Ten, I also wouldn't be shocked.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting to see what plays out there in Columbus this year. An immense amount of pressure. And Ryan Day alluded to it at Big Ten Media Days the other day when speaking to the media that he understands the pressure that is being placed upon him. I want to let y'all know the Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway makes its return starting next week. One winner will get season tickets to all South Carolina home football, baseball, women's and women's basketball games. The upcoming 24-25 sports calendar. You can go online to register at 1075thegame.com starting Monday. Just like last year, we're going to announce 3 finalists that will then come out to our summer golf tournament at Charwood Golf Club on August 23rd, and we will announce a winner there. It's all sponsored by the Men's Clinic at the Irmo Professional Center. Again, we're broadcasting live out at Firehouse Subs 2805B Sunset Boulevard in West Columbia. Tyler, Wes, and Chris, along with you, going until noon on the game. All right.
There we go. All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends over at Gold Line Framing. Give them a call today, 803-739-1337 for a limited time only. Tell them that you heard about them here on the game. They're going to give you 25% off a framing purchase or any sports-related prints or items. Again, just tell them that you heard about them here on the game. Call them right now, 803-739-1337, or why not head on over there in person? We're nearby here in West Columbia today at 511 12th Street, West Columbia. In store, they've got an art gallery, home decor, furniture, and gift items. Of course, they want to handle any and all of your custom framing needs. That could be diplomas, original artwork, canvases, jerseys, flags, whatever it is you want to have framed up. Our friends Kendall and Joni, they're going to take outstanding care for you over at Gold Line Framing. Again, that phone number,
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Garnet Trust Hour Extra Point Takeover. We're out at Firehouse Subs. By the way, brought to you by our friends at Krantz Heating and Cooling, Garnet Trust Hour. Out here at Firehouse Subs, 2805 Sunset Boulevard, West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. The sandwiches just came out. It smells amazing here. I'm here, Wes, Chris, Haley's here, Josh is here. We got tickets to give away for the Old Dominion game when the store opens up here in a couple minutes. Come by and see us. Got T-shirts, got koozies. It's a whole party going on here, as it often is whenever we get out to Firehouse Subs location. Well, what are you working on over there?
Well, we got New York steamer.
Okay.
But we have an array, including your favorite.
My TBR.
The
Gotta have it.
TBR, the Turkey Bacon Ranch, is here. We also have, the pepperoni pizza meatball sub. Has apparently been a revelation because you remember like months ago it came on as a limited time offering, and I think it sold so well they've just kept it on the menu indefinitely.
I mean,
we have that too.
It's been a couple of trips since I've tried it, but when I had it a couple times ago, it was pretty darn good, as everything here is.
It was fantastic. Fantastic.
And by the way, they don't let Lincoln Riley make the brisket for the smokehouse beef and brisket sandwich. So you're good. It's going to be delicious. It's going to be moist and juicy.
It is not dry.
Not what Lincoln Riley's bringing to the table.
Exactly.
So Steve Spurrier was on a show. He's down there in Gainesville now, so he talks on a lot of Gator-related programming. But he had some interesting comments in reference to the ongoing realignment in college football, and particularly as it relates to the in-state rival down there in Florida, in Florida State. Here's what Steve Spurrier had to say about Florida State and potentially Clemson looking for new homes as they try to escape the ACC.
Well, I think FSU definitely belongs in the SEC. Clemson sort of belongs there also, but I don't know if SEC wants to go to 18 teams. So I don't know. Maybe the Big Ten would like to have them. Who knows? But it is it is what it is, and I think you just go 1 year at a time, and then after that, see where you're at and go from there.
Sorry, that was again Steve Spurrier talking the other day about where he thinks these schools could fit, and obviously we've talked about this ad nauseum. The fact that Florida State and Clemson are very unlikely to come to the SEC, very unlikely to come to the Big Ten. And Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, the other day said, "Hey, we're focused on 18. We're welcoming in our new AAU accredited universities, which Florida State and Clemson are not. So their best shot is being in the Big 12, should they be able to escape the ACC, which I don't have a lot of confidence they're going to be able to do. I'll believe it when I see it, type of thing." But what he said there was fit. And fit is a different definition depending on who you ask. Like, do Florida State and Clemson fit the mold of what the SEC is when they're looking for institutions outside of, the money thing and the AAU and all that kind of stuff?
Geography,
the geography, like
TV markets.
Would they fit in the SEC if given the opportunity?
I mean, I think so. I think they would. Do you?
What qualifies for fit to you? Like what does that mean in your definition?
Well, I mean, so there's a few different factors I think you could look at, and I probably made a bunch of people mad just by saying that. First of all, let me say I'm actually not in favor of the SEC adding those teams. I don't think it really makes sense for them for a lot of reasons to do so.
Sure.
That said, if they like when Carolina joined the SEC in Arkansas, if they had also said, "Hey, here's South Carolina, Arkansas, Clemson, and Florida State," I don't think anybody would have been like, "Oh, that makes it's not like Cal or Stanford going to the Atlantic Coast Conference, and Clemson softball flying to Berkeley to go play a game. Like it's a lot different. I think geography is part of it, right? Clemson is in the state of South Carolina in the southeast. Florida State is in the state of Florida. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, remember Miami was in the Big East,
right?
So I think geographically they fit the mold. They've also had successes in their football programs. Clemson more recently than Florida State, but certainly, like if you're looking at geography, fit. Clemson's had some high-profile matchups with SEC programs. Same for Florida State when they were rolling. So you don't really have to stretch to say, okay, with those, that just makes no sense. It's weird for Southern Cal to be in the Big Ten.
Right.
It's weird for Cal and Stanford, to be out playing ACC schools and being in the ACC. It's just weird.
Sure.
So I think it fits from that standpoint, but that's different than does it make sense for the SEC to add them? Of
Sure.
course, Clemson and Florida State would love to get into the SEC.
As everybody would.
I think they've been very upfront, but Clemson has operated a little bit more behind the scenes in how they've done things than FSU, who's out here.
Sure.
We hate the ACC. We want out. We want blah, blah, blah. They've played it out more in public, but it makes total sense why not just those two, look, any program would love to get an invite to the Big Ten or SEC. It's great for you.
Sure.
But we consistently have heard and been told that, the SEC is not very interested in those schools, and that, in fact, the Big Ten may not be very interested in them. And a lot of people are going, they went back to exactly what you're talking about, geography, program success. Those aren't the only factors. And so now we're getting some actual evidence publicly with what the commissioners of both the conferences are saying that, no, we don't want those programs.
Yeah. And look, I'm a big geography guy. There's nothing that bothers me more than the fact that we have teams on the Pacific Ocean playing in the ACC now. You know what I mean? Like, geography used to be the paramount, thing that separated conferences, and you had regions and different styles of play and that kind of stuff. That's all kind of gone out the window now. So yes, from a geography standpoint, South Carolina, Florida, boom, you're right in the SEC. Makes perfect sense. I think the passion is certainly there as well for what they care about. Not only their, football program, which again is kind of the driving force behind this, but all their sports across the board have very deep passion throughout their entire fan base. So that certainly fits, but it's just something that, unfortunately, again, those aren't the key factors. And people, it was so hard until we started hearing, Greg Sankey and Batiti and stuff like this say it themselves, that for people to think that the trophy case didn't matter. You know what I mean? People say, well, Clemson's won national championships the past decade. Florida State won theirs a decade ago. They've been in the college football playoff, won the ACC last year. Like, why doesn't that matter? Because that's not the factors they look at.
Yeah.
Would they love to bring in championship level programs? Absolutely. But there's a reason that the Rutgers is in the Big Ten. As I mentioned, the California schools are in the ACC. It's all about markets. It's all about bringing in TV numbers and viewers and money and all that kind of stuff. That is the driving force that leads to all the money. They love to have you be a successful program, but that is a 5th or 6th tier criteria at this point in time.
Yeah, it's not like the SEC or the Big Ten are starved for big-time programs either.
Sure.
Would they maybe change the equation if they still had 8 or 10 teams and were struggling as a conference to produce championships?
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But they're not. And so they can afford to be extremely choosy. What was the SEC's last move? They added Texas and Oklahoma. They're not out here just randomly selecting teams. They added 2 huge name brands who have captured championships in multiple sports, have huge fan bases, are giant brands, and unlock new TV markets for you.
And I'm not siding with Florida and Clemson, Florida State and Clemson here, but there is a element of their argument against the ACC that I do, have to agree with, where they look at all the realignment that happened this past year. Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC, Southern Cal, UCLA, Oregon, Washington going to the Big Ten. Those are big, significant brands that improve the value of that conference. And then they're in the ACC. At Southern Miss, all right, they've had some good years in the AAC, but that's still a group of 5 program. And then 2 bottom dwellers from the Pac-12 when it finally collapsed that don't add an increased value to what that conference is. So again, I'm not siding with them, but I can understand their frustration when they look around and say, what the heck did we do in all this?
Yeah, I mean, from a resource standpoint, that's what they're looking at. I mean, they do have legitimate arguments that these other conferences, the revenue's different. They were signed at different times. But again, it's about the branding. I mean, it has the ACC in certain sports like football has been a punchline at times because, yes, Clemson could point to, hey, our conference doesn't really matter. Like, we go and compete for championships, and they have. And when they played SEC or Big Ten programs like they have under Dabo Swinney, they had good track records in doing that, making the college football playoff. The conference didn't matter as much, but that doesn't change the fact that the conference hasn't been very strong and doesn't pull what, the SEC and the Big Ten does. So, in some regard, maybe their revenue shares were unfair, if you want to call it that, but also they were a little bit proportional, more proportional to the interest level and some of the brands that they have. But it's a smart idea for those schools to get out and say, hey, if we can attract a better deal, let's try to go do that. The question has just been, can they find that? And so is the Big 12 a better move for them, all things considered? I guess so. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this ultimately plays out, it may
Yeah.
be a while, as you said.
Yeah, again, I'll believe it when I see it. If they can get out, and that court fight is not going to be ending anytime soon, that's for sure. Again, broadcasting live out at Firehouse Subs, 2805 B Sunset Boulevard here in West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Tyler West and Chris going out until noon. Coming up next, we'll continue our journey around the SEC. Talk to Nick Roush from KSR, get the insight into what's happening in Lexington, Kentucky for South Carolina's Week 2 opponent. Again, is the Yarnet Trust Hour, sponsored by our friends at Krantz Heating and Cooling. Gamecock Central takeover of Firehouse Subs in West Columbia here on the game.
All right, I want to tell you about our friends over at Integrated Media. Shout out to Michael, Nathan, and their entire team. Do an outstanding job with anything audiovisual that you may need at your home or at your business. They've been out of my home. They've been out of West Mitchell's home. They've been out to Jay Phillips' home. They've serviced a lot of folks here at the game and a lot of folks around the Midlands, a lot of satisfied customers. They can do anything that you may need at your home from an AV standpoint. If you're looking for a new television, new wireless speakers, if you're having trouble with your internet signal and want to make sure it's strong all throughout your home or business, they can help you with all that. The good news is you don't have to go to the big box stores. They can source the equipment for you, and then they can come and do a professional installation for you. If you want that man cave, if you want to trick out your man cave, your patio, anything, they can do it for you. IntegratedMediaInc.com or give them a call, 803-948-8327.
The Gamecock Central Takeover and Garnet Trust Hour, sponsored by our friends at Krantz Heating and Cooling. Tyler, Wes, and Chris hanging out here at Firehouse Subs, 2805B Sunset Boulevard in West Columbia. Going to noon. Stores open. Come by, get a delicious sub. I just had my usual dose of turkey bacon ranch. It was delicious as always. Never a bad sandwich here at Firehouse Subs. And it's got a full plate of full table of sandwiches. Got T-shirts, got koozies. Dreamy Josh says we have football tickets. You got to come in here and do something for them. We got to figure out what that is.
The sandwiches are for us, though.
Sandwiches for us.
The ones on the table.
Ones on the table. Those are for
ones
us.
Behind the counter can be for you.
You do have to purchase your own sandwich. Again, you can't go wrong with any of them. They still got barbecue Cuban out here as well. So plenty of good options here at Firehouse Subs. We'll work to get Nick Roush on here in a couple minutes from KSR and get insight into what's going on with Kentucky. Wes is actually heading out here, heading up to Rock Hill. We talked a little about this a little bit yesterday. Big commitment coming up at 12 o'clock today with Malik Clark, who would be another four-star wide receiver. That's South Carolina's growing 2025 class. And I go back to our conversation yesterday, feeling pretty good that this might go South Carolina's way.
Yeah, this has been an interesting recruiting battle because, when Malik Clark hit the radar, you got his offer from South Carolina, you got the feel of, man, this is going to be a guy that they need to get, right? So many compelling factors. Number one, talented high school wide receiver, in-state guy. We don't have to go relitigate some of the in-state wide receivers that have gotten out of the Palmetto State and gone to play for other schools.
Right.
There are several instances of that, and Gamecock fans don't really like that, right? Rightfully so. This is a kid who's over 6'2", almost 6'3", 180 pounds, and kind of just has, he checks so many boxes that you look for in a big-time wide receiver. You don't look at him and say, oh, is he big enough? He is, about 6'3", 180. Can he run? Yes, he can. You look at him on film. You look at some of his verified times that he's put up in testing scenarios at camp. This spring, this summer, he put up some really good verified times. And then he's got the ball skills as well. So big-time prospect in terms of what he can bring to you. But then a very interesting recruiting battle. North Carolina actually had a lot of traction with him at various points in the recruiting process. And so you looked at it and went, man, are the Gamecocks going to be able to beat the Tar Heels on this one? And that would have been, I think, if it would have gone that way, I think North Carolina slipped. If it would have gone that way, that would have been pretty painful, I think, for South Carolina. FSU has actually made a pretty big push as of late. But from all the feedback that we have been getting lately, it seemed pretty positive for South Carolina.
And, we talk all the time about the importance of when you get that on-campus visit. And out of all these schools that are factors for him in the running here, South Carolina was the first one to get him on campus, I believe, right there at the end of May. And we've talked about it. Sometimes it's good to be the first. Sometimes it's good to be the last. Where do you think this kind of falls with Malik Clark and being that South Carolina get the first opportunity to have him on campus?
Yeah, I think the fact that he's an in-state guy helps you. You think about, and it's not the same recruitment, the same player, the same person, but Jadeveon Clowney, right?
Mm-hmm.
If he would have played in Georgia, if he was from Atlanta,
sure.
Honestly, that would have been a much, much, much tougher pull for South Carolina. Let's be realistic. It was already a tough enough pull for South Carolina back then.
Sure.
But having the in-state factor certainly helps you. And I think, having the Rock Hill factor helps you, a little bit as opposed to maybe some other parts of the state. But with an in-state kid like that, it's the type of guy that you don't want to let go. You don't want him to get outside the state. So South Carolina certainly has prioritized that from the beginning. And I think they have done a really good job. Shane Beamer, Mike Furry, new director of player personnel and recruiting, Darren Usher, has stepped in and done his part since he's been here. And I think they've really, in the past several weeks, they've been able to turn the tide. You bring up an interesting point on the official visit, Tyler. Wes has a theory that he can't explain because he's on the road now to Rock Hill.
Right.
But you either want the first or last official visit. Now, you can go back and say, Chris, I found this prospect. Carolina got the third official visit and he committed. Yes, there are examples of that, but there does seem to be something to that where if you get the first and you can kind of set the bar, you have the last at bat, so to speak. Malik took 4 official visits.
Right.
North Carolina, Florida State, South Carolina, and NC State also got one. It's Florida State that's become the biggest challenger, but I think that first official visit this summer really helped South Carolina begin to turn the tide. And then it looks like if everything holds and goes well up until about noon today, it looks like they've been able to successfully turn the tide in this one.
And obviously, you got the recent commitment a couple weeks ago from Lex Cyrus. That was the battle that South Carolina had with Penn State, which was his in-state school up there in Pennsylvania, another 4-star kid. And, how much of an influence, especially at a spot like wide receiver, where I've seen multiple guys get to play as post quarterback, that you see, hey, this guy wanted to come to South Carolina. I think I want to go there and join him too.
I don't really think so. I mean, those guys, sometimes with in-state guys or sometimes with the camp circuit, you even see guys from, different states geographically or different regions get to know each other a little bit and talk about it. I haven't seen any evidence of that those guys really know each other even. I don't think it hurts at all. But I think that was much less of a factor here. I think it was much more about, hey, you're a Rock Hill guy, you're an in-state guy. Stay home. You can reach your goals here.
Sure.
We can develop you here. And Malik Clark in past interviews, and I would expect him to detail this more today if it does indeed go South Carolina's way, but he's talked a lot about a home feeling, right? And
right.
Again, when you're an in-state guy and you're an in-state program, that's something that you can sell a lot more on the trail.
Yeah, and Ian West is on the road up to Rock Hill right now. Should be there right in about an hour. We'll try and check in with him before we get out of here in the 11 o'clock hour, get his final lay of the land before the commitment comes up at 12 o'clock. We did get in contact with the guy, Nick Roush from KSR. We'll talk to him coming up next to wrap up the hour, get insight on what's happening with the Kentucky football program. Do want to remind you, this Saturday, the game in Hardee's, we continue to team up to make sure school students in the Richland 1, Richland 2 school districts have the supplies they need the upcoming school year. You can come join me this Saturday at Hardee's at 3852 Rosewood Drive from 2 until 4 p.m. Bring your school supplies. If you're one of the first 100 folks to do that, you'll get a free coupon for chicken tenders from Hardee's out there, 3852 Rosewood Drive, again from 2 until 4 this Saturday. Again, we're broadcasting live at Firehouse Subs in West Columbia, right on Sunset Boulevard, across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Come by and see us going until noon here on your Thursday on the game. welcome back in. It's the Garnet Trust Hour, brought to you by Krantz Heating and Cooling, as well as the Gamecock Central takeover of Firehouse Subs here in West Columbia, across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Tyler and Chris along with you as Wes is on the road. Ted to the commitment of Malik Clark in Rock Hill, which will come your way at noon today. Time to continue our little trip around the SEC. Talked to our guys from Florida and Missouri already this week. Now time to check in with Nick Roush from KSR up there in Lexington, as we are 37 days away from South Carolina and Old Dominion, which means we are 44 days away from Carolina's first road trip to the Bluegrass State to take on the Kentucky Wildcats, a program that Carolina has been kind of neck and neck with these past couple of years, have gotten the better of the Wildcats these past few seasons. But Nick, first of all, appreciate your time. These two programs kind of in similar places with bringing in a lot of new faces at important positions, starting with quarterback like Brock Vandegrift. What's the level of excitement up there in Lexington for this upcoming season?
It's one of those things where a year ago people were really pounding their chests about Devin Leary, who was one of the top-ranked guys from the transfer portal, and that didn't pan out very well. So there's been a little bit more caution when it comes to placing high expectations on the former five-star. But one thing is just a lock with Vandegrift at quarterback is he's going to be able to run the ball. Devin Leary couldn't do that, and when you saw Kentucky have success with Will Levis in this post-style offense, it's because he could run the football. So bringing that back to the offense, I think, has folks fired up, especially last year when really Kentucky was going to move the ball. It was big player buzz. Having the quarterback run game can make this offense incredibly more efficient. And that's really the biggest, I think, uncertainty, because outside of that, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of experience coming back to have folks excited about this football team this fall.
Nick, here in Columbia, I think it's been really similar the past few years, no different in 2024. That Kentucky game earlier in the season is viewed as kind of a measuring stick, right? Like, I like to stay away from must-win type of language, but, it is a game where if you win it, you can kind of see the path here to have a successful season. If you don't win it, because of how tough the schedule is, what you got coming next, it might be a lot tougher to reach your goals from a wins-loss standpoint. Is it the same type of vibe there in Lexington with the South Carolina game? Has it been circled in a similar fashion?
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking with Chris about it previously. It is the kind of you got to win it to get where you want to go. I mean, it's hard to say that about a week 2 game, but I mean, it's a big inflection point. For the longest time, Gerald Lorenzen, the hefty lefty, we did a show with him, and the Louisville game was that case. Like, you couldn't have a good year if you didn't beat U of L in the season opener. That's kind of how this Kentucky-South Carolina game is, especially for Kentucky, where they've struggled at home as of late. In their last 10 games against Power 4 competition at home, they're only 3-7. That loss to South Carolina 2 years ago, Will Levis was injured. I mean, that's the difference between the 8-4, even the 9-3 season. They also lost to Vanderbilt at home that year. You got to take care of business at home in this 16-team SEC, and that's certainly the case for the Wildcats in Week 2 against the Gamecocks.
Yeah, talking to Nick Roush from KSR, getting some insight into the Wildcats for the Week 2 matchup with South Carolina going on the road to Lexington. Of course, at the end of last year, the day of the Louisville game, funny enough, the rumors of Mark Stoops potentially going to Texas A&M took off, and obviously that didn't end up happening. Elko ending up being the coach over there. But this year, coming off of 2 7-6s after having the 10-3 year back in 2021, what's the significance of this season for Mark Stoops? I mean, is there a hot seat conversation? Like where is the fan base and the school at with Mark Stoops at this point in time?
It's a mixed bag, because on the one hand, you've got this great roster coming up. You're still recruiting at a higher level than you've been able to recruit historically. He has more wins than any other Kentucky head football coach. But at the same time, you have had the back-to-back 7-6 seasons. You had the flirtation with A&M, and then yesterday he's making comments about how he's exhausted basically from fundraising for nil. So there's kind of this trepidation, if you will, where you're wondering, like, how much more does Stoops have in the tank? He was trying to jump ship, and you're appreciative of what he's done. You think he's a good coach, but it kind of feels like you're nearing the end of the road. But at the same time, you're also grateful he's got to this point where you've got a solid foundation going into this 16-team divisionless SEC. So it really is a mixed bag, and that's why it'll be crucial, so crucial to winning that Week 2 game against South Carolina, so you can have that belief that you can still have a big season. And if not, then people will, if they lose 3 times in a row to Shane Beamer, a lot of people are going to go back to that A&M, are going to question if Stoops still wants to be the head coach at the University of Kentucky.
Nick, let's talk a little bit about that experienced and pretty talented roster that Kentucky does have coming back. You know, now that you've had a chance to go through spring ball there, get into the summer, preseason camp around the corner, if you had to boil it down in the next 2 minutes, what would you say are, you know, the biggest strengths of this team where there aren't many questions? And then what are the things that are question marks in your mind from a roster standpoint?
The biggest strength is clearly in the trenches and stopping the run. Deion Walker is going to be a future top 10 NFL draft pick. He's a monster, and he's surrounded by a bunch of redshirt junior seniors like Octavius Oxygen, Trayvon Ripka, Keyshawn Silver, former 5-star transfer from North Carolina. Like they are really big. They are really stout up front. De'Aaron Jackson was already one of the best run-stuffing linebackers in the SEC. Then they went and got another one in former All-American Pop Dumas Johnson from Georgia. So running the football is going to be challenging against Kentucky. That's kind of why I like the way this matching up against Lenore Sellers in his second start for South Carolina. But outside of that, I think the bigger question marks are in the secondary. They got to replace the starting cornerback. They got a talented kid from Michigan and DJ Waller who looks the part, but Kentucky ranked 11th in pass defense last year, and that killed them on third down situations, and is a big reason why they lost to Clemson and why they lost to Tennessee. They couldn't get stopped. They couldn't get off the field with their secondary. And then the other part is offensively, the offensive line is returning 4 or 5 starters. The guy you got to fill in for a spot has started 26 games in the SEC at Tennessee. It looks good on paper, but Mark Stoops wants to get back to this real physical style of play, run the ball downhill. Are they going to be good enough to do it? I think so, but that question is still up in the air ahead of the fall campaign.
Nick Roush from KSR checking in with us, and Kentucky will have Southern Miss in week number 1 before taking on South Carolina in Lexington week number 2. Nick will probably check in with you or some of the guys up there in KSR before that game gets here. We certainly appreciate a little bit of your time this morning.
Man, I can't wait. Talking season's fun, but only 30-some-odd days before we get to the real show.
We are counting down the minutes until we finally get some real football action. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, guys.
Again, Nick Roush from KSR. And again, we've talked about this in so many different ways, the importance of that week 2 game and how much of a swing that can mean for South Carolina. That could be literally the difference between you making a bowl game and being a 5-7 or something like that. Again, vitally important in week number 2, going up against another team that has a lot of questions with how much their roster shifted around this offseason.
Yeah, not many swing games, I think, for either team, you know, and obviously I'm more familiar with South Carolina and South Carolina's schedule. You know, South Carolina has a few games on the schedule in 2024 where you go, they should win that game.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, I don't know, a few games at most where you go, that's probably a swing game. And then you have some that you're rightfully going to fairly look at before the year and say, if South Carolina were to win, it would be an upset. You know, now we'll change our thoughts maybe on a lot of those games as the season plays out. You know, a game in October may look different when you get past a few games, but
sure,
vitally important game for sure in week 2 for both of these programs.
2 hours down, 1 more hour to go. We are at Firehouse Subs, 2805B Sunset Boulevard in West Columbia, across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Come by, see us, get a sandwich, get a shirt, get some football tickets as well. Going until noon here on The Game.
All right, I want to tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. They have been since 1983 a family-owned and operated business right here in the Midlands. They can take care of all your HVAC needs. Been pretty hot this summer. If you got problems with your unit, if you want to just kind of get out in front of things to make sure that you're not going to have any problems, or if you want to look at going ahead and replacing that old unit, got questions about what that may look like, what's best for your home, they can do it for you. Their team has over 250 years of combined experience. Their service techs train on cutting edge equipment, so they can provide flawless service to you. They've been out to my home. I've trusted them at my house. You should do the same. KrantzCooling.com. That's Krantz with a K, cooling with a K. KrantzCooling.com or 803-672-3224. Give them a call or go to their website to schedule a visit. Make sure your HVAC is in tip-top shape with Krantz Cooling and Heating.
Hour number 3, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central takeover of Firehouse Subs 2805B, Sunset Boulevard, West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Tyler and Chris along with you as Wes is on his way up to Rock Hill for the Malik Clark announcement, which is set to go an hour from now. Now, funny thing with commitments, right? There's always the time of when the commitment is scheduled. Then there's the actual time when the commitment is made.
Don't jinx it, Tyler.
Because sometimes because I love when you guys do the live stream that I can tune right in and see what's happening. And sometimes, hey, guy says he's going to commit at 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, he's sitting there. He's got the hats in front of him, mom, dad on either side, whatever it may be, and we're good to go. And it may be like 3:02, 3:03 when the announcement is made. Sometimes you tune in and it's the blank table. They got to introduce everybody. Coach has got to get up there and speak, the pastor from his church, his mom, whatever it may be. And 20 minutes later, we finally get the hat being put on. So I don't know. Do you have any insight on which way this one's going to go?
Don't know. I think we'll get like if I had to guess, if I had to bet on it, if betting was legal, 12, 15-ish. That's just my guess.
Okay.
I don't have a vibe check on it.
Well, it could be sooner, so you need to tune in.
Yes, Wes will be able to give us, I think, a better lay of the land. If he gets there and it's close to noon and we don't even have a table set up or anything.
Yeah, they got to bring out the cloth, the hats.
It's a bad sign. I will say we're on a pretty decent run as of late of announcements not being 45 minutes after.
Sure.
We've had some that have been right on the dot. We've had some where, they start on time. It takes a few minutes for all the speeches and everything. It has not been bad lately. So I think it'll go off pretty well if I had to guess.
I can't believe I've never asked you guys this, but you guys go into enough of these things. Do you subscribe to the theory about the quality of the hat and which one they're going to choose? Because the hat science, there's always like, hey, if one looks like it's been put on before, it's probably the one he's going to pick. If it looks like if it's an Alabama hat that you can get at the gas station as opposed to one you have to go buy at like Academy Sports or something like that, like that, those kind of things can be some giveaways.
There was, I can't even remember which prospect it was. It was a prospect from this recruiting cycle. I'm pretty sure the 2025 class, where you knew going into the announcement that it wasn't going to go South Carolina's way. We weren't really tracking it, but you just kind of paid attention on social media. And Carolina did have a hat on the table, and it was like the worst Carolina hat ever. Maybe the prospect was like, "That's a really cool Gamecock hat. I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna show him some love." But it went the opposite direction.
It definitely came off like, "Hey, we need a Gamecock hat. Here's $10. Go find one."
Well, it looked like one that I don't even know if the thing it looked like somebody had illegally sold it or something and illegally put logos.
Fell
on
off
there.
the back of a truck somewhere.
It was not. It was not good. But I'm not a big hat science person. We've seen prospects put on Gamecock hats in the past. You're going, that hat, is kind of ugly.
Did Harbor have the hat? I think it was a flat bill, wasn't it? That it looked, maybe it didn't fit his head the right way, but I feel like that one looked kind of odd when
levitating on his head a little bit.
But I guess we were all in collective surprise that he picked South Carolina over Oregon. Maybe we weren't paying as much attention, but I think his hat may have been a little bit wonky as well. And again, I guess when you guys go to as many of these things as you do, they all kind of runs together at a point.
Yeah, we've had some fun ones. I mean, the Ja'Kai Moore one was a classic. I mean, when we've seen Ja'Kai in media settings, we've even brought it up to him, and he would just laugh about it. But that one, Wes and I drove to that one together.
Mm-hmm.
We drove up to Virginia, where he was from. Beautiful drive. But
it did take 8 hours?
7 or 8 hours. And we get there, and we felt good about where South Carolina was. Everything we were hearing. So he pulled I guess it would be a double switcheroo.
Mm-hmm.
He used not hats, but shirts.
Mm-hmm.
He came in, had on multiple layers, obviously. So he had on, I don't know what he had on at first, just something kind of generic. Takes that off as a Gamecock sweater. So people start cheering.
Right.
And you're like, okay, there's the Gamecocks. But then right after it, he takes it off, and there's a Penn State sweater. So then you're like, oh, he did. Most people do one switch of something so you're like, oh, wow, he just picked Penn State. So your immediate thought in your mind is we just drove 8 hours for him to pull the switcher and pick Penn State. But then he took the Penn State sweater off and had on the Gamecock outfit. So that was a good one. I mean, we were like, that got us.
Right.
Your heart drops. I just drove 8 hours for nothing.
This is reminding me, Quay Walker, when he committed to Georgia, I don't know if you remember this or not, but he was an Alabama commit, and he was going to flip his commitment. And initially he put on a Tennessee hat and then threw it before putting on the Georgia hat and committing to Georgia, where obviously went on and had a successful career. And the legacy of the Tennessee hat from that, there was a Twitter account dedicated to it. It's so funny how the just simplest little things these guys do with their commitments can kind of take on a life of its own like that.
Yes, the thrown hat. Well, you had who was the guy, the running back that he was the first, I think, to have a live animal.
Isaiah Crowell.
Isaiah Crowell from Columbus, Georgia, right?
Yep. He lasted a year and then ended up at Alabama State.
By the way, getting us kind of off track here. So I interviewed our guy Chris Hatfield yesterday, Gamecock commitment.
Mhm.
And I pre-recorded an interview with him that we're going to play on Gamecock Central here soon. And I got him to do the pronunciation of his hometown.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Because you knew it. And I tried to say it 2 or 3 different times during the interview, and he would just be laughing. And I got it wrong.
How
right?
did you say it?
I think the first pronunciation I did was Ludowishi.
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. And that's what he said. No, he gave it to me and I repeated it. Okay. But then later in the show, I tried again. Towards the end, I tried again. So I kept messing up. But it's Ludowishi.
So he says wishy?
No, well, you say it. What is it?
Ludowici.
That's it.
Ludowici.
It's not SH.
No, it's Ludowici.
Yeah. Ludowici. Okay.
Because see, y'all got on to me for not being able to pronounce the one town in South Carolina that I couldn't get right.
Yeah.
But there are plenty in South Georgia.
I texted Wes after. I was like, I just did this interview and I did like the Tyler with Lancaster thing.
Right.
I couldn't get Ludowici. I keep wanting to put an SH on the end.
Right.
Anyway. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. These town names, very, very interesting across the board. And I'm sure you run into some very interesting ones. And again, we'll talk with Wes coming up a little bit later on the hour as he arrives in Rock Hill. We'll get kind of the lay of the land as he gets ready for the Malik Clark commitment a little bit later on, right at noon or sometime afternoon, depending on when everything gets rolling there. I want to dive into this. This is something that I brought up yesterday on my show, and I got some back and forth with some people on the Firehouse Subtext line, but I want to kind of pose this question to you, and maybe you can think about it in the break if you need to. But Lenore Sellers goes into his first year at South Carolina as a redshirt freshman quarterback, 4-star kid, a lot of hype, obviously a local kid. We saw what he was able to do in the short little spurts that he got to play a season ago. My question for everyone was, what does success look like for Lenore Sellers in year number 1? And that could be a variety of different things. That can be a stat line like, okay, I want to see him throw for 2,400 yards and run for another 1,000 and have 25 combined touchdowns. That could be moments. I want to see him go in and beat Alabama on the road in October, or pick up a win against Ole Miss, in early October, whatever it may be, beat Clemson at the end of the year, who knows, or just, look like the leader that he's been built up to be. Like, there's a variety of different ways that you can go with this. And, everybody's going to have their different opinion on it, but we obviously want him to be successful because that means South Carolina will be successful. So just kind of off the top of your head, and again, we can kind of dive into more of this in a moment. What is your kind of initial thought of what success would look like for him?
I think if you just had to, kind of streamline it and also make it not too specific, stay healthy, show spurts of that promise that you do have. We all know there's going to be freshman moments. Even if he has a great year, we look back after 12, 13 games, whatever it may be, and say, man, he had not just a good, but a great year. You'll still be able to look back and say there were some freshman moments in here. There were some mistakes. Now, if he doesn't even have that, then you've got something truly special, right? So I think it's just have a good year statistically, leadership, have some big drives, have some big moments. And then ultimately, what does the team do? So if you can baseline, get back to a bowl, win 7 games, win 8 games, and you've had a good individual year,
sure,
I think that's going to get folks really excited. And I think that would certainly be a big success. That may not mean a lot of postseason accolades even. We were going through it the other day. You look at the 3 preseason all-SEC picks on offense,
right,
and who those quarterbacks were. It was Carson Beck, Jalen Miller was 3rd team, and Quinn Ewers was 2nd team.
And those all guys could go in the first round of the draft this
that
year.
Doesn't even include, Brady Cook, Jackson Dart. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU's getting a lot of love. And there are just so many really, really good quarterbacks in this league. Whoever's playing I honestly don't know. Whoever's playing quarterback for Jeff Levy at Mississippi State, because of that offense.
I believe that's Blake Shapen from Baylor.
Shapen.
Yeah.
They seem high on him. He may have a really good year.
Right.
So, you've got a very quarterback strong league in the SEC this year, I think. even more than some other seasons. So it may not mean a lot of accolades for Sellers. If he comes out and is getting postseason accolades in this crowd, I mean, that means he's had a really big year. But again, I don't think you need to set expectations too awful high. But you don't need to set expectations low either, because this guy's got a chance to be really good.
Again, if you didn't get a chance to weigh in yesterday, let us know what you think success looks like for Lenore Sellers in your number one in South Carolina starter. Firehouse Subs text line 803-404-6100. Want to remind you once again that as we move through the month of July, we do have the return of the greatest Gamecock moment since 2000. Starting this upcoming Monday, going to be putting out Twitter polls each day, running through next Thursday, giving you 4 choices each day to pick your favorite Gamecock moment since 2000. They'll take those 4 winners, have another poll the following Monday, and then announce the winner on August the 12th. It's all sponsored by our friends at Columbia Craft, 520 Green Street, down in the Vista. We're broadcasting live out at Firehouse Subs here in West Columbia, 2805 B Sunset Boulevard. Tyler and Chris going up until noon. Josh is out here. He's got tickets to give away, and he did inform me we have our criteria. You must come in, and you must be able to tell us the commitment that Wes is covering today that he's on the road to right now.
Name of the prospect.
Name of the prospect. You give us the name of the prospect. We'll give you tickets to go see South Carolina take on Old Dominion in week number 1. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Thursday on the game.
We are out here at Firehouse Subs, right across from Lexington Medical Center. Come out and see us. Win yourself some tickets. Got about 7 minutes that we'll still be out here, but the good news is Firehouse Subs right across from Lexington Medical Center will be open for the rest of the day and the night. So if you want to get yourself some lunch, if you want to get yourself some dinner, or if you want to place a catering order, they can take care of all of that for you. And if you say, well, Chris, I'm not near Lexington, I'm in Columbia, I'm downtown, I'm in Sumter, wherever you may be, they can help you out with that too. They got 14 convenient locations all around the Midlands, and Firehouse Subs also makes it super easy to order your lunch, dinner, or catering. You can do it by going to firehousesubs.com, or you can download their app. That's my favorite way. The Firehouse Subs app on the Apple Store or Google Play. You can register for a free account, earn yourself some rewards on future purchases, and use the Rapid Rescue to go. They'll have your order waiting on you right when you get in the store. That's Firehouse Subs, firehousesubs.com, or the Firehouse Subs app.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler and Chris hanging out with you at Firehouse Subs here in West Columbia, going up until noon. Again, store is open. Got a ton of people coming in here. I'm working on a pepperoni pizza meatball sub, which is as delicious as always. I think I've had 4 different ones so far today, so I'm getting my fill. I'm getting around the menu a little bit here. And again, Wes had to take off and head up to the commitment of the person. We'll hold off on their name because if you want to get the tickets to the Old Dominion game, you do have to come in here and tell Josh the name of the commitment that's announcing coming up today at noon. And then, boom, you got tickets. Go see week number 1 game.
Easy stuff.
You
got one more segment to do that, right? Because
yes,
we're going to talk about
recruit. We are going to talk about set recruit coming up. By the way, if you win those tickets, I would recommend starting to hydrate and put on sunscreen now because 4:15 on August 31st is probably going to be pretty hot.
Well, and it is still worth going, Tyler, even though you went on record with quotes saying that Carolina will win by 60. What was it, 63?
63 to
I'm
3.
never going to let you forget that. Literally 60-point victory.
I mean, why not?
I'll tell you, man.
Shoot for the stars, man.
If that happened, it would be a joyous occasion in Gamecock country. I mean, there's already I'm quite enjoying the memes and jokes that are going around about getting into an overtime battle with Old Dominion and all those things.
I mean, have they just not obliterated a lesser opponent in a long time?
It's been a while. Well, I mean, you think about, so last year they lost, gave up 9 sacks, lost.
Well, that was North Carolina, though. It's different.
But no, it's a yes and no. So in 2022, they beat Georgia State. What was that, 35-14 or 35-21?
People didn't come away from that game feeling great. I remember that.
Not all inspiring because they struggled on offense. Gave up some yards defensively. They just came up with some big plays, and I think they blocked like 2 or 3 punts.
Right.
And then in 2021, they beat Eastern Illinois, who was the second worst football team I've ever seen. No offense to the whatever they are.
Right.
Eastern Illinois.
Right.
Won 46-0.
I think they're the Panthers.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
But that was awesome. That was like the least impressive 46-0 win you could ever have. It's against a bad team. They didn't look very good on offense.
Right.
So I think people are very much, they want to see come out and just beat somebody thoroughly.
Well, funny enough, the last time they scored 63 points was against Tennessee.
Well, that would be a fun,
that would be
repeat
fun.
That offensive performance
for sure.
It'd be fun
for sure. But again, that'll be Sellers' first opportunity as a starter here at South Carolina. Well, I say that he's not been officially named the starter for the season, but we know that he's going to be air quotes. And I don't expect Beamer to announce him as the starter today when he speaks at Birdies with Beamer either. That's going to be something that we're going to get as we get closer to the start of the actual season. But I posed the question a few minutes ago, and we talked about this a little bit from your perspective of what success looks like for Lenore Sellers in year number 1 at South Carolina. And if you think he needs to be on the Heisman Trophy, stage in November or in December at the end of the year, and that's fine. If you just want him to have a fair amount of touchdowns and low interceptions, that's fine too. Nameless Texter weighs in and says, we keep talking about how great Sellers will be, and I'm excited as well, but Spencer was great. I feel like we could have Tom Brady throwing, but if we don't have a line, that he'll be running for his life each game as well. Hopefully our line will step up this year so we can see Sellers' true talent. And that is an important thing to note, not only with Sellers, but with Rocket Sanders as well. Or you got a guy in your face the second you're getting the ball in your hands, you're not going to be very successful. Now, again, we think the offensive line is going to be better. Knock on wood, they stay healthy, and that athleticism that Sellers brings to the table should produce a better running game than it was a year ago.
I think you got several different layers to this. There's no doubt that, if you were to pick out one thing offensively over the last, not just last season, but the last few years, and say, what could South Carolina fix offensively to make this overall picture better? It would be the run game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a conversation here for a while, but you've got different layers to it. Number one, personnel, right? So this is the best shape that South Carolina's running back room has been in a while. Again, is it on paper? Yes. But it's on paper in the sense that you're just plugging in some guys that have had great success at other programs, different levels, right? You got freshmen, then you got SC State and Jawan Howell. You got Oscar Attaway at North Texas, but you do have Rocket Sanders, who has done it in the SEC as a 1,400-yard rusher. Your personnel situation looks way better than last season, number one. So you've got the personnel issue. Number two, you do have the upfront line play. Can you be better there? You don't have to be elite. You're not going to be elite. But we know last season's performance was a low bar. We know that there was a lot of injuries. Can you just be solid to good? If you can do that, combined with the personnel, looks better. And then I would say actually two more things. Lenore Sellers unlocks some things for you with his skill set. But the other thing is scheme, right? Will Carolina change up some things schematically because of Sellers and just in general to help them, whether that's, hey, we like Rocket Sanders with this particular scheme. Sean Elliott, some of the things that he will bring to the program that we know that they've been working on in practice. How much of that do they implement? So you got, I think, 3 or 4 different things that, again, on paper, you plug in and say, I could see it getting better because of these factors, but you do have to go out there and execute those things.
When I talked about this yesterday, I was looking at some of Sellers' old recruiting profiles coming out of high school, and the pro comparison that they made was Jalen Hurts, 2 guys with similar statures. Obviously, Jalen Hurts, very good runner, has pretty good arm himself. I think the belief was that Sellers' arm was a little bit better. And again, we only got to see a small sample size of him last season. Would you still say that's a pretty apt comparison if you're looking for maybe a pro guy to say that North Sellers is similar to?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think did Charles Power make that?
It was the on 3.
Yeah. I think Charles Power made that one. That's a pretty good one. And he's bigger. KJ Jefferson was another one that's been thrown out, and I think those two I think KJ Jefferson's probably even more like powerful as a runner, but Sellers is
bigger.
He's huge. Sellers is, though, I think faster, more elusive, and I think from what I've heard and what I've observed is a better thrower, is a better pure passer. So when think about those 2 guys and kind of combining their skill sets, that's exciting. But the other thing about Sellers is that it's not just, sometimes you get these guys that you're like, that guy has such immense physical tools. If he could ever put it together, or if he can figure out the game, or too bad his football IQ isn't that high. Like, he has all those things too.
Right.
And again, this is something you're translating from an on paper type of situation, or we've seen some glimpses of it, or we think he could be this. You have to actually translate it to, big time situations, big time pressure. The cool thing about Sellers is that he's such a cool customer. He seems very well equipped to handle all those things. But I think we're pretty quickly, like, we keep talking about that Kentucky game week 2. Let's say Carolina comes out, they're able to put on a really nice performance and just beat Old Dominion and have kind of a dominant type performance. If they can do that, then you go into week 2, you're feeling better about it. Lenore Sellers can go out and have a big game against Kentucky week 2. The hype train will probably start in full force, and it might be well deserved at that point.
And it's interesting that week 2 game, as we mentioned with Nick Roush, in the last hour, that Kentucky's breaking in Brock Vandegrift, who he's been around the league for a while, but mainly in a backup role and playing in garbage time. Nico's coming in at Tennessee after playing the bowl game. Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. You got Garrett Nussmeier, who again has been around for a while, but not played a ton of significant snaps. You got to have this whole really third of the league breaking in new guys at quarterback, and some of them are going to be probably pretty good. Some of them maybe towards that middle to lower end of the pack, and Sellers is kind of right there in the mix of how good can these guys be, because they're going to be looked at as that next crop of great quarterbacks in the SEC once the Becks and the Ewers and the Milrows eventually move on.
Yeah, well, and it could be that, again, they could have he could have a really, really big individual year and a really, frankly, a better than expected team year. And we may be looking at it saying, if that happens, Lenore Sellers got hosed. He should have gotten a bunch of postseason awards. Getting way ahead of ourselves, obviously. But again, there's a lot of great quarterbacks in this league. So he's, I really do think he's the type of guy that could eventually be one of the faces of the SEC, like those guys that you just mentioned are right now. I think he could eventually get there. But he individually and South Carolina as a team, as a program, they have some things to go out and prove this year. And so it starts with going out and surpassing expectations that have been set for you. Again, they're fairly low, 13th in the league is what this team's been picked. Do they have, sometimes you might look at 13th and say, I just really don't think they can get above that. That seems about right. I feel differently. I think it seems right based on what we know, what they did last year, the questions they have to answer. It is not a stretch to look at this team and say, because of Sellers, because of other returning personnel and changes and tweaks they've made, not a stretch to look at it and say that, hey, they can end up surpassing that and being, a good bit better.
Remind you once again, Ultimate Season Ticket Giveaway returns starting Monday. That's this coming Monday, July the 29th. One winner will get season tickets to all South Carolina home football, baseball, men's and women's basketball games for the 2024-2025 sports calendar. You can register online starting Monday at 1075thegame.com. And just like last year, we're going to take 3 winners, bring them out to our summer golf tournament at Charwood Golf Club on August 23rd, and we'll announce the overall winner that day. This is all sponsored by our friends over at the Men's Clinic at the Irmo Professional Center. We'll go talk to Wes on his way up to Rock Hill for that commitment. By the way, if you come in here and tell us the name of that commit that we hope is going to go South Carolina's way, you can win tickets to go see South Carolina in Old Dominion week number 1. Just give it to our guy, Dreamy Josh, here as we are out at Firehouse Subs in West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center, going until noon. Tyler and Chris here on the game. Clark. We are broadcasting live at Firehouse Subs here in West Columbia, right across the street from Lexington Medical Center. Going up until noon, a couple more segments to go here. We'll check in with Wes Mitchell on his way up to Rock Hill in just a moment. I've never actually been stopped in Rock Hill, driven through there.
Oh.
I've heard I should go there. Well, what's on the list of things to do in Rock Hill?
Carowinds.
Yeah, maybe besides Carowinds.
Right, yeah. Yes, technically, that's Rock Hill.
Yeah,
I mean, it's right
I,
there.
I've seen it from the interstate. It looks fun.
Well, Dave Coniger's from Rock Hill.
I know.
Go visit him if he happens to be there.
That is Rock Dam Hill, South Carolina, according to David Coniger.
That's right. No, I mean, actually, I've been there, hung out. Wife and I went up there. Just the downtown's kind of cool.
Okay.
They got restaurants if you want to go to a brewery. They
Okay.
got things like that. It's a cool spot to go to. You should check it out.
I got to go there. I got to go to Greenville still. I gotta make my way around the state a little bit more. I went back to Charleston a couple months ago, so I've been there before. But yeah, I gotta get up into the northern end of the state, the
Greenville's
upstate.
a must. You must do.
Well, he's on his way up to Rock Hill right now for the Malik Clark announcement set to roll here in about 26 minutes. Since you left us an hour ago, Wes, confidence level changed at all on which way this one's going to go? Still feeling pretty good about South Carolina.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're guys are at what I kind of call the final stretch, sometimes tightening in terms of the schools we're tracking here. I think it's kind of interesting. Like a lot of times we'll get sort of that final word leading into an announcement on where a kid's going. I don't think either of the schools know where he's going. Like from what I've gathered, and I've been making a couple calls on the way, I think all the schools are maybe going to find out at noon, which does give you a little bit of an unknown, obviously, in projecting something. Malik Clark and his family and his kind of camp are keeping this thing very close to the vest. So, ultimately, I would still predict or project South Carolina. I think that's going to be the pick. At the same time, a lot of times Chris and I will use code words that basically mean we already know. I like their chances is probably the most popular one. I don't think we're at that phase quite yet. I think Florida State, even though it was North Carolina for much of the process, that was a thorn in South Carolina's side. I think it's Florida State down the stretch that has done all they can to try and make things interesting for the Gamecocks. The Gamecock staff may find out at noon, along with the rest of us, where Malik Clark is going.
This has been an interesting recruitment, like you said, Wes, and that it was the Tar Heels who had it looked like the biggest opportunity to play spoiler. And I know you had heard at many different points that they were, in fact, in the lead, for a lot of this process. But how do you think South Carolina has been able to turn this thing around to where going into the decision, they are now the favorite? They are now the school that's kind of been the hunted for the last few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I went back and looked at some of our reporting and just even looked at some texts I had to try and kind of relearn how this thing played out in terms of timing. And, I believe it was like January that we first started hearing North Carolina. And I went back and looked. Literally, I was told at the time, North Carolina is in the lead. I think as his recruitment sort of took shape early on, I think I kind of had a little bit of an impression just based on this is a wide receiver priority guy. We know that's a position of need. He's from Rock Hill. South Carolina really wants him. It felt like putting the pieces together. Oh, this is the guy South Carolina probably should land. Then you start to actually get that true information coming in. The recruitment starts to actually take shape. And it was like, wait a second. It was kind of like record skip. North Carolina leads this thing right now. And so, that was the case, I think, for a while. It really felt like the Gamecocks chipped away, got him on campus several times. I think some of it was Mike Furry kind of just chipping away at that relationship as well. We know he's got a late start compared to other coaches who were already hired at their places. So I think they chipped away. I think the official visit, looking back, and then the weeks following that even, is when it felt like South Carolina really made their push. It sounds like Florida State has tried to make life difficult, has kind of had their little counterpunch here. Again, I still think the Gamecocks will win out, but this is not going to be a landslide victory, in my opinion. Like, this one truly has been fairly tight, with South Carolina having to do everything from just a total staff standpoint to try and get Malik Clark on the commit list.
And again, we'll know within the hour which way Malik Clark is going to go. But if he does pick South Carolina, you add him to the list that already includes Lex Cyrus, Brian Roanoke, Jaden Sellers is just short of being a 4-star in a lot of the industry rankings across the board. I mean, this is already a pretty solid class for 2025 that can only get even better by adding a guy like Clark to it.
Yeah, I think you take this receiver class to the next level if you add Malik. I mean, he's obviously a highly recruited guy, but I was going back over the film yesterday, and, you know, we talk about this quite a bit. Like, sometimes guys are ranked highly for different reasons. Sometimes you're just talking about upside and potential and those things. And Malik has a load of potential, but I think you look at his actual on-field ability already, his development as a wide receiver already, and you know, this is already a pretty well-developed, very, very talented wide receiver prospect. They move him around quite a bit. You know, we saw South Carolina do that with David Legette last year. They kind of do that similarly at Rock Hill with Malik Clark. They'll obviously have a new staff this year, so it'll be interesting to see how they use him. But point I'm getting to, this is a true outside X wide receiver at the end of the day. And South Carolina has not landed a ton of those guys. When you're talking about 6'2.5", 6'3", long strider, a guy that has actually well-documented speed, sub 4.4 in the 40-yard dash at the Under Armour camp on an electric timing device. So, you know, this is a guy who I think has upside, but is already fairly well developed, uses his body, can make things happen, and just is a little bit different than the other guys that South Carolina has in the class. And in a lot of ways, even compared to a lot of the guys already on campus, he's a little bit of a different prospect.
All right, Wes, we'll let you get back to it. Again, that commitment coming up, and you guys will have all the coverage on Gamecock Central as well coming up here right at the top of the hour from Rock Hill. And hopefully this time tomorrow we're talking about another great receiver out of this 2025 class.
All right, boys. I'll see y'all soon.
All right, again, Wes Mitchell on his way on the road up there to Rock Hill, should be arriving here shortly. Remind you once again, coming up this Saturday, I'll be out at the Hardee's at 3852 Rosewood Drive from 2 until 4 p.m. collecting school supplies for the Richland 1 and Richland 2 school districts. Come by with your supplies. If you're one of the first 100 people to donate, you'll receive a coupon for a 3-piece chicken strip meal from Hardee's. Again, come by and see us this Saturday from 2 until 4 at 3852 Rosewood Drive. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs out at Firehouse Subs here in West Columbia across the street from Lexington Medical Center with an awkward introduction to the Big Ten for UCLA's new head coach. We'll get to that next here on the game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Chris Clark along with you for a couple more minutes out here at Firehouse Subs in West Columbia. Been a great morning, giving away T-shirts, tickets, koozies. Obviously had some delicious subs. A great time as always. We appreciate Larry Chandler for allowing us to be at one of his restaurants once again. Chris, did you ever have like the nightmare as a kid when you were in school that you were going to be asked to do like a book report or something on something you didn't read or didn't prepare for, and suddenly you're up in front of the entire class and you don't know what to say?
I have. We have all been there.
I think we've all been there.
Yep. I've seen it. I've at times experienced it myself, where you get that. And I have a theory. You go ahead with this, and then I'll get my theory.
So Deshaun Foster is the new head coach at UCLA. He'd been the running backs coach for a couple of years. Obviously, former running back with Carolina Panthers that people may be a little more familiar with here locally, taking over now that Chip Kelly's gone on to be the OC at Ohio State. And yesterday, he was being introduced at Big Ten Media Days, his first time at Media Days as a head coach. And typically, like we saw with Shane Beamer, you typically have a prepared list of things that you talk about, sometimes for 5 minutes, maybe even up to 17 minutes. Deshaun Foster's was a little bit different. Here was his introduction yesterday at Big Ten Media Days.
Coach Foster, welcome to the Big Ten. We'll begin with your opening statement.
How you guys doing? I'm happy to be here. Glad to be a part of this great conference. Finally putting two great emblems together, UCLA and the Big Ten. We're a school that's won, 123 championships, so this fits us being right in this conference. Football-wise, we're just excited. I'm sure you guys don't know too much about UCLA, but our football program, but we're in LA. It's us and USC. We I'm just basically excited, really. That's it. Any questions?
In a second.
Oh man, that was that was a minute that felt like an hour. He started off good. Hey, excited to be here. Happy to be in the Big Ten. All
Checking
this kind
boxes,
of stuff.
yep.
Checking boxes, hitting all the usual cliches that we hear coaches say. At some point, you expect him to go, "Hey, here's what we got coming back. Here's guys we're excited about. Recruiting class, transfer portal. Fan base. We play in the Rose Bowl, for crying out loud. Like hit one of those. But when you get into I'm just excited. Probably don't know. It's UCLA. We're in LA. I'm like, I think we probably could have figured that one out. With Southern Cal, got that one too.
We're out here with our guys over at Southern Cal. If you didn't know, there's two schools in LA.
And maybe it's one of those things, given the fact it's first time as ever as a head coach, maybe he didn't think about it. And that morning they're like, oh, hey, you have to give a statement, right? I'll just wing it, then get into questions. But you get up there, the bright lights, there's media people everywhere. I think they're in Lucas Oil Stadium as well. So you got a big venue just kind of all around you. I think he got a little bit struck by the lights and kind of lost himself there.
Which, Deshaun Foster's a guy I love. He was one of my favorite players with the Carolina Panthers. I mean, it's not like he's never been under pressure or anything,
sure.
But I have a theory about what happened.
Okay.
All right. And I've never been a football coach at any level, not even flag football or kids youth football. I haven't had to go give a press conference at Big Ten Media Days, SEC Media Days, but I don't think he had. He was going to wing it, I think. And, it was as I've had to go in front of crowds and speak. I've had to speak for some reason. There's this one event in York, and it was over a balcony when all the people were on the ground.
Okay.
So it was almost like you're you're a
king giving
coming out to address his people. And I had to go after Sheldon Brown and Ray Tanner.
Oh,
and as I'm going, this was years ago, and as I'm going up there, Ray went first and then Sheldon went, and Sheldon had gotten the crowd all fired up. And it's my turn to go up, Ray Tanner, is he, kind of a jokester. He's like, good luck beating that, or something like that. So, I did fine. I think, in terms of I didn't freeze up or anything.
Right. But it's like, I probably could have gone maybe first or something.
But I've, everybody's been there to where you're like, I've had to speak in front of a bunch of crowds, and sometimes you lose your place. And when you do that, you can panic.
Yeah.
So having a paper to remind you or just being able to quickly pivot to something else is important. And so my theory is that he didn't really have much going on. He's like, I'll go up there and talk and be fine.
Yeah, he had the points in his head. He was ready to go.
And that he just lost it at some point. And once he lost it, he just really couldn't get it back. So he said a few awkward things, and eventually he pivoted to like, hey, you know what? Let's just take some questions here.
It's one of those things that, like, in any other instance, if you asked him to name his entire roster alphabetically, he probably could have done it in his sleep. But up there, he probably couldn't remember a single player's name when he's out there looking at all these media members as he's stumbling through that opening statement.
Now, Brandon Marcello with CBS Sports had a story up, and it noted that, hey, like, yeah, he had a 64-second statement that did not go well, but, like, he's a lot more than that. And so Deshaun Watson actually went into the smaller group setting with some reporters later, and Marcello says that he was funny, refreshing, and authentic. He even joked about, like, I'll probably get on Twitter and see some jokes. And the way that he explained it was that he would rather let reporters ask him questions than filibuster his entire 15 minutes. So, and that makes sense, because a lot of the things in the opening statement are the things that we joke about.
Totally.
Okay, well, you're telling us about your GPA and all those things,
For somebody that cut all the audio from SEC Media Days last week, I skipped over pretty much everybody's opening statement because I knew there was going to be nothing of substance in there. You're just fluffing up your own program at that point in time. And then when the reporters started asking questions, like, okay, now we're getting down to brass tacks a little bit. But yeah, even Beamer's 17-minute opening monologue, I'm like, I know there's not going to be anything riveting in here that we need to know necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, if he, was there a quote unquote better way to do that opening statement to where it didn't appear that he kind of lost his train of thought? Yeah, I'm sure he could have said, hey, excited to be here, blah, 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 a couple quick things. Hey, actually, instead of just giving a long statement, I'd love to hear some questions from you guys. I do think he kind of lost his train of thought, but hey, that's all right. At the end of the day, is that really going to affect whether or not he has success because he flubbed his opening statement? I don't think so.
So Brad Powers, who works for Covers, betting site, put this out last night. After this statement, UCLA's week 1 line against Hawaii moved by half a point, where they were favored by -13, now favored by only 12.5 after the statement was made. So it affects things from a gambling standpoint, at least.
Apparently so. If you looked at that and said, "Oh, I don't know."
But I think about this, like, for anybody that's recruiting against UCLA, how much of like a good, do you want to play for this guy? Can't even give a 2-minute opening statement without fumbling on himself. Come play for me instead.
And then Deshaun Foster can send them, well, here's my 15 minutes with local reporters.
Right.
Oh, and here's my NFL highlights.
Right. He's got a little bit of cachet that he can, fall back on, but not the greatest introduction to the Big Ten for those who didn't know who Deshaun Foster was. That'll do it. Thank you once again, Larry Chandler, for allowing us to be out another one of your Firehouse Subs locations. It's been a blast hanging out here today. Coming up next, the Live from Birdies with Beamer is going to be Terry with the halftime show here on your Thursday on the Game.